English, or Spanish. Anyone who doesn't watch this video until the end and doesn't subscribe is gay.
The last day of school was usually a time of celebration and joy, but for me and my friends, it turned into a nightmare that we would never forget. Immediately after the final classes of the school year ended, my friends, Sarah, Amir, Nada, Miriam, and I decided to spend the night at school. The idea came from Sarah, who had always been enthusiastic about unusual adventures. She proposed the plan with great energy and excitement, and we eagerly agreed. The school was nearly empty due to the summer holidays, with only a few teachers left preparing to leave. The building, an old structure with creaky floors and long, dimly lit hallways, had always been a bit eerie, especially the basement where old and unused items were stored. The walls were adorned with faded posters and class photos from years past, adding to the nostalgic and somewhat spooky atmosphere. As the evening approached, we gathered our supplies, sleeping bags, flashlights, and snacks, and entered the school. We made our way to the old storage room in the basement, a place that had always been rumored to be haunted. This room, cluttered with old desks, chairs, and forgotten school supplies, was dark and musty. It had a single, small window that let in very little light, making the room feel even more isolated from the rest of the school. We set up our sleeping bags in a corner and began the night with laughter and games. The first few hours were filled with fun and excitement. We told ghost stories, played truth or dare, and munched on our snacks. The sound of our laughter echoed through the empty hallways, creating a stark contrast with the silent, darkening school around us. As the sun set and darkness enveloped the building, the atmosphere began to change. The playful energy started to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The dim light from our flashlights created long, dancing shadows on the walls, and every creak of the floorboards seemed amplified in the silence. Around midnight, we heard a faint, unintelligible noise coming from the floor above. It sounded like whispers, but too distant and muffled to make out any words. Sarah, always curious and fearless, decided to investigate. She grabbed her flashlight and headed upstairs, and we followed her, our nerves on edge. As we cautiously made our way through the dark hallways, the sounds grew louder and more distinct. They seemed to be coming from one of the old classrooms. When we reached the room, what we saw made our blood run cold. In the middle of the classroom, an ancient, gnarled tree had inexplicably appeared. Its twisted branches seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers, and the room was filled with an eerie, unnatural silence. We stood there, frozen in shock, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. Just then, Nada, who had been lagging behind, stumbled and fell to the ground with a cry of pain. She had twisted her ankle badly and was unable to move. We rushed to her side, trying to help her up, but every attempt to move her caused her excruciating pain. The strange noises from the surrounding rooms grew louder, and we felt a sense of impending danger. Despite Nada's injury, we knew we had to get out of there. We supported her as best as we could and started to make our way back to the main entrance. The hallways, which had seemed familiar earlier, now felt like a confusing maze, and the darkness seemed to close in around us. With every step, Nada winced in pain, and the fear in her eyes mirrored our own. The building seemed to come alive with strange creaks and whispers, making it hard to focus on finding our way out. At one point, Amir thought he saw a shadowy figure moving at the end of the hallway, which sent a wave of panic through the group. After what felt like hours of struggling through the dark and eerie school, we finally reached the main entrance. To our horror, the door was locked. We frantically searched for another way out, but every door and window seemed to be sealed shut. The sounds from the basement grew louder, and we felt as though something was closing in on us. In a desperate attempt, we managed to force the door open and stumbled out into the night. When we finally made it to the schoolyard, we were strangely aware that several hours had passed since midnight, and none of us could explain what had happened. The cool night air hit us, bringing a sense of relief, but also leaving us with unanswered questions. The next day, when the police and search teams arrived at the school, no evidence of anything unusual was found. Nada was taken to the hospital with her twisted ankle, and the pain and terror of that night remained with us. That night became a haunting memory and a story that we would never forget.